This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Mr. Simon ANGOVE, CEO of Syndigo, welcome to the podcast.
Delighted to be here, Jason.
It's awesome to have you along for the ride today. We were talking off air, although you are based in Atlanta, Georgia. I said that accent doesn't sound like it's a Georgian accent, but you're Mr. International. You've lived in many countries. I think you said you've lived in 5 or 6 countries around the world. Went to university in the United States, went to high school, I think you were saying in Dubai. So like you are Mr. International, right?
That's right. Much like yourself, Jason.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? We're very lucky. I think anybody working in the digital space, we've been lucky that we've always been able to work remote, even if the world didn't necessarily realize it. And it puts us in pole position today to be able to work from anywhere. For me, I can work from anywhere as long as I got my laptop and a great internet connection. I can do what I do from anywhere. We're pretty lucky like that, aren't we?
We certainly are. Yeah, no, definitely helps with work-life balance.
Yeah. And look, we have featured Syndigo on the podcast before, back almost exactly 2 years ago, episode 383 with Benny Blum. We talked about enriching and syndicating e-commerce product data to sell more in more places. We talked all about that and what that looks like from the Syndigo perspective. But I tell you, the company has undergone some pretty significant changes in the last 2 years. You personally have overseen the acquisition of probably, I don't know if you agree, but one of your biggest competitors in the world, One World Sync. You acquired them in September of 2025. And then most recent acquisition, Tagstar, which is basically like an AI-powered social proof and messaging platform, acquired them in March of 2026. So on your watch, you guys, I think, have done 2 of the biggest acquisitions in company history, right?
That's correct. Yeah, particularly One World Sync. This was the bringing together of the number 1 and number 3 players in the category of product experience management.
And when you think about, because I know obviously the way I actually initially got introduced to Syndigo was through Riversand and your acquisition of the Riversand PIM MDM platform. And that's when I first started working with Syndigo. And Syndigo has had a history of significant acquisitions, right? This is not your first, it might be your first rodeo in terms of acquisitions inside the company, but the company has built a lot of its capability on the back of buying either competitors or complementary platforms, integrating them to the whole. But that comes with its own unique set of challenges, right? Disparate tech stacks, disparate underlying code bases, trying to create a seamless experience for your customers under a singular Syndigo type dashboard. When you think about acquisitions through the lens of trying to not only integrate the tech, but the culture, the people, the sales motion, et cetera, into the business, what is the hardest bit about that? And how does Syndigo approach that?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, you're right that the company's history has been built through acquisitions. We've actually did 14 acquisitions. The last one was in 2000, which was Riversand, which is the basis of our master data management, product information management offering. And when I joined 4 years ago, my observation was the company had not done a good job of integrating all of these acquisitions. So with the approval and alignment with my board, we agreed that I would spend the early part of my tenure doing a really good job of integrating these businesses. And it's not just getting everything onto one integrated technology platform. So single data pipeline, single pane of glass, from managing the data to activating and syndicating that data to measuring the efficacy at the shelf. But also, as you say, integrating the teams and the culture so that we've got one way of working, one set of values, one unified commercial team that sits behind all of it. And most recently, the acquisition of One Will Think that we closed on September 1, right? It's challenging when you bring 2 competitors together. So we worked hard to make sure that day one, we announced things like the structure of the organization, who the leadership team is, what is our product strategy, which offices will remain open, so that we quelled all of the anxiety that may come from our employees, our customers, and our partners, and moved past it quickly. And I would say since September 1, I'm extremely pleased with the integration and the progress that we've made. We are ahead of plan. Of course, for any acquisition of this size, there are going to be speed bumps along the way, but I am super pleased with how quickly and successfully we've managed to bring these businesses together. And the last thing I'll say, Jason, is when you've been spending years fighting each other, the other side is taught to know that you are the enemy. So when they combine, you've got horns and a barbed tail. And what you actually find out is there's actually a lot of cultural affinity. We're very passionate about our category. We're very passionate about our customers. And I think I've also been super pleased with how we've brought these cultures together. We find out we share a lot more than we have differences about.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about that, especially with their GDSN data syndication capability over at One World Sync, funnily enough, a couple of years ago, we also had them on the podcast. We're familiar with how they operated and the position they held in the market, but it's super interesting. Post acquisition of One World Sync, you're now a multi-billion-dollar revenue business. You combined across all your entities, you power something like, I think, 90% of the top 20 retailers in the United States. And so in that sense, you own the data pipeline between a lot of these merchants, a lot of the manufacturers, getting manufacturer SKU, ASIN data, all of the different data from GS1, et cetera, getting that down the pipeline, getting that into retailers' hands, getting that into distribution's hands in the case of B2B partners. And so really this is when we think about all of the sort of key, I like to call them packaged business capabilities, PBCs, you cover almost the entire product data and information pipeline end to end now, don't you?
We do. So you've touched on a couple of things about the strategic rationale that brought these two businesses together. One is about distribution reach. So how do we help brands get the data to the places where it needs to be? So one way we do that now, as you said, is through the world's largest GDSN data pool. The second way we do it is we've combined our networks. So we have a much bigger network today. We've got 15,000 consumer brands connected to 3,500 retailers and distributors. It's 3 times larger than the next provider. So that dramatically helps our distribution reach, right? And when you think about it for a brand, part of the value proposition here is a one-to-many story. I want to manage my brand story, single source of truth in one place. And I want to be able to activate it, syndicate it, publish it to as many places as possible where those products need to show up on a shelf in front of a shopper. And the second part of the rationale, as you spoke about the portfolio here, is we're now the only provider that controls every aspect of the product description page, the digital shelf, because we got ratings and reviews from One World Sync. So it's not just the core above the fold content, the enhanced content like comparison charts and videos and 360 spin. It's now, of course, all the ratings and reviews, which are critical, not just in influencing a human shopper's decision, but now, of course, a machine shopper's decision.
And how do you, or where perhaps, do you see yourself in the world of B2B? Now, obviously, you're working oftentimes with manufacturers that are sending their product data and information down to retailers, grocery, et cetera, so that they can maintain control over their product data, consistency over their product data, consistency over the variants of products that they sell through various different retail channels, et cetera. They want to present a consistent brand experience wherever their product has a touch point with a consumer, right? But we equally have massive challenges. And as somebody who, for the last 7 years, has worked exclusively in the B2B e-commerce sector for manufacturers, distributors, platform vendors that work in that space, investors that work in that space, agencies that work in the B2B space. And we have equal, and in some respects, even worse challenges between data exchange between manufacturers, distributors, dealers, retail footprint stores that are pure B2B that they sell to the trade, for example. We face very similar challenges, and especially considering the fact that e-commerce is still, it's starting off a very low base, but it's growing much faster in the B2B world than it is in the B2C and DTC world. That's partly because something like 98% of retailers today already do e-commerce and already offer e-commerce. Something like 40 to 60%, depending on vertical and category, in B2B offer e-commerce today. So there's so much greenfields opportunity in the B2B world today. But oftentimes, and when I'm consulting to these manufacturers and distributors, one of the biggest hurdles that they face is product data quality, product data completeness, product data distribution challenges. And I would say they face at least the level of challenge that the retail sector faces. Are you seeing the exact same thing? And I know you guys heavily focus on that sort of manufacturer to retail data distribution model and data routing model, but it feels like B2B is in dire need of similar assistance?
No, it's a very astute question. And we serve both consumer brands, manufacturers, we serve traditional retailers, and then we serve distribution. It's a massive, one of our fastest growing segments, Jason. They are not as far ahead in terms of digital transformation, e-commerce, that those other two verticals are, but we're seeing tremendous growth there. And you're exactly right. At its foundation, it's about data and data quality to drive digital transformation, drive e-commerce, drive AI strategies. We are heavily entrenched in food service, so providers like Shamrock Foods and Topco. We're heavily entrenched in industrial distribution, so Sonepar, $40 billion electrical distributor operating in 40 countries, Beacon, roofing supplies
Oh, yes.
distributor. So it's a massive growth vertical for us because they do face all of the same challenges and they are behind.
Yeah, they're absolutely in catch-up mode, and I'm certainly experiencing that level of pressure, demand, growth in my world because of that, because they realize in many instances they're playing catch up. A lot of the legacy players in the industry, they're aging out, they're retiring, they're dying off, and so these businesses and brands are trying to figure out, how do we take this information that is oftentimes locked up in print catalogs, it's oftentimes locked up in network drives and desktop computers of sales reps and locked up in sales reps' heads. And there's a lot of institutional knowledge and industry and vertical knowledge that's held inside human beings in the B2B space. And that's a scary thing when they have never engineered their businesses to make that data, make that information a one to many model. It's a one to one model, right? And still, sales reps to this day, they'll zip up files with spec sheets and data and price lists, spreadsheet price lists. They'll zip them up into a zip file and they'll email them off to their customers. This is still an exceptionally common scenario in the B2B world. It's sad, but it's true. And I see it every single day. And so when you go to talk to these manufacturers, distribution networks, dealer networks, etc., what do you pitch to them as the value prop? And you say, look, we're going to ease X, Y, and Z for you. And it's going to be so cost effective for you that this should be an absolute no brainer for your business. What is your commercial pitch to them that says, hey, look, you have a problem. We understand your problem perhaps better than anyone else in the industry, or at least as good as anybody else in the industry. Here's how we can actually help you.
Yeah, so we do pitch the entire product experience management story, which is around managing your data, that single source of truth, the ability to govern it at tremendous scale, then activating that data, pushing it down to all the places where it can add value. And then lastly, being able to measure the efficacy of that data. Is it driving the desired outcomes and bringing those signals back? And we describe it as the most complete composable platform because it's complete. It manages the end-to-end flow of data, as you described earlier, but it's also composable because you can start anywhere and then grow over time. So 9 times out of 10, they start with data. They start with master data management. They start with product information management because, as you described, Jason, this data is fragmented. It's everywhere. It's inconsistent. It's not up to date. It's not complete. You can't execute any omnichannel strategy, AI strategy without having that single source of truth. I say you can't execute an omni-channel strategy because if someone shows up in front of a physical shelf or a web, social, mobile shelf, or now an AI shelf, and that product information is inconsistent, you're instantly going to lose trust. You're not going to have that person or that machine recommend or buy your product. And clearly, any AI strategy relies on accurate, structured data to be effective. So it always starts with addressing that core data issue, typically through the deployment of a master data management or product information management platform. Then you've got the opportunity to activate it and deliver the outcomes you're looking for.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing emerge in the manufacturing distribution space is, and I'd love your validation of whether what I'm seeing is something you're seeing become exceptionally common, is that manufacturers and distributors are rarely nowadays just manufacturers or distributors. They're usually a hybrid. The reality is everybody in the B2B world is trying to get away from selling SKUs and moving to selling a solution model, right? So if I'm a manufacturer and I manufacture 80% of my catalog. Let's say I sell pumps. Let's say I manufacture pumps and I sell pumps, right? I probably don't just want to sell pumps. I want to sell an entire pumping solution into the market, regardless of whether I, manufacture all of the connecting components and the valves and the piping solutions and everything else. I probably want to go to market with a full solution, right? And the same for distribution. Like distribution doesn't want to just distribute. They may have some house brands, they may have some internally designed product, and so they may distribute 80% of their products, but they might manufacture or white label like 20% of their products because they want to sell entire package of solutions and they want to do it at the best margin possible. And then we have almost a third outlier experience, especially in distribution, which is to say, look, we don't necessarily want to not only be a distributor, and we not only want to be maybe manufacture a portion of our catalog that where we think we can make the best margins, but we also want to be a drop shipper or a marketplace, meaning that we don't want to have to warehouse and own 100% of what we sell. If we sell a million SKUs, we might have on the shelf, which is common in distribution, like between 1 million and 5 million SKUs for a decent sized distributor. Like in retail, that's a huge catalog. In B2B, that's not unheard of to have a 5 million SKU catalog. But they might say, look, we want to have 200,000 of those SKUs on the shelf at all times of our fast moving products. But the rest of those, we actually want them to be shipped by the manufacturer or master distribution or whatever it might be. And so we have these hybrid go to market models, but they all have to be served by a fantastic data layer around product information, right? Either way, whoever you might be, hybrid manufacturer distributor, hybrid distributor manufacturer, drop shipper slash marketplace model, or endless aisle model for the products that you want to sell, but you don't want to be the merchant of record for, and you don't want to actually have to do the fulfillment, logistics, and warehousing for. But all of these rely on phenomenal product data and flows. And so that's kind of the first question. Do you see this as an emerging model where kind of everybody is trying to be all things to all people as much as possible to capture as much market share as possible? And then secondarily, I'm seeing a second trend emerge, which is a willingness to share supply chain data and inventory data up and down the supply chain. This has really only started to become a thing in the last couple of years. So inventory data sharing between manufacturing, distribution, dealer networks, etc., and even local stock holdings in B2B retail footprint, that is a development that requires really good and well-defined data flows. Because then if we have visibility across the supply chain, it means fewer stockouts. It means instead of being a asset heavy model for distributors, we can run lower inventory levels if we kind of know where all the inventory is and where it's likely to need to be in the future. So those are the two big trends that I'm seeing. Are you seeing the same?
We are, as you said, the identity of who you are is becoming much more varied. I'm a retailer, I have my own brands, I'm a distributor. The types of different shopping journeys that I support are evolving and changing as well, right? It's no longer single channel to search, discover, purchase. It's now non-linear, multi-channel, right? You may see something on Instagram, go check brand.com, visit the store, look up ratings and reviews, ask ChatGPT for a recommendation, go home and buy on Amazon. So yes, we need to support all of these different identities and the way they do business. When it comes to the other question around supply chain, so you may or may not have seen, but one of the big announcements we had a few weeks ago was a strategic partnership with Blue Yonder, the biggest enterprise supply chain software company in the world. Because when people think about product experience management and the data at the heart of an enterprise, they immediately think about, oh, this is about distributing that data down to all the shelves. It's around the shopper experience. Actually, this data is equally as valuable back up the supply chain, supporting systems of operation. You think about something as basic as a warehouse management system. To optimize the picking and packing of a pallet and loading on a truck, you need to know the weights and dimensions. That data comes from us. All of the supply chain data in their network is supported by us. Something as basic as a planogram at a physical shelf, that data is all supplied by us. So what we're seeing is that Blue Yonder recognized the importance of accurate, structured, up-to-date data to fuel all of these supply chain systems of operation. So 100%, Jason.
It is an exciting time, and I think that it used to be B2B in general was a very closed kimono industry, full stop. Everything was considered commercially sensitive information. What our range is, commercially sensitive, gated B2B experiences. How much inventory we hold, gated experience. What pricing we give to individual customers, totally gated experience where, you know, digital customer acquisition in general has historically not been a B2B strength. In fact, I would say that they've been anti digital customer acquisition in B2B historically. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is we're seeing the strongest B2B players. They're completely ungating their experience. They're maybe they don't show pricing, maybe they don't show inventory without you being authenticated because they need to show you your price list, but they're at least showing everything that they carry. You can do your research. Their products can now be found in a Google search and an AI search. They can be fully indexed by the industry. And what we're seeing on the flip side, on the procurement side, is we're seeing AI led supplier discovery becoming the norm. And as a result of that, if you're still hiding your entire experience behind a gate where you can't see anything until you authenticate, if your customers can't see anything until they authenticate, neither can Google and neither can AI search. And so, are you seeing a emerging trend like what I'm seeing, which is this total reticence to share anything with anybody anywhere unless you've got a formal relationship with them? Even that barrier is starting to come down. And a lot of B2Bs are realizing, geez, okay, we have to be able to digitally acquire customers, not just digitally service them.
100%. And I think it's changing at warp speed. The number of boards and C suite conversations we've had are all around we've got to do better at digital customer acquisition. For most of them, it's well under 10% of their
Yes.
overall revenue. And a lot of what's driving the adoption of our platform is they know they need to drive a much better digital strategy. It starts with the data and then how they activate that data. So it's, yes, it's probably the main business driver as to why distributors are purchasing platforms like our own. And you spoke about AI, search, discovery, recommendation. That's also driving it as well. And while the jury's out as to how much purchasing will be done through I think nobody's in doubt that it will still be influencing potentially $1 trillion plus of commerce over the coming years. So they also recognize the need to have structured data that is geared not just towards the human customer, but is also geared towards the machine customer, right? There's not a meeting I can walk into where inevitably the conversation about AI shopping LLMs is not raised.
And I think it's even more relevant in some respects in B2B because it's a job to be done. Procurement is a job to be done, right? It's 99% of the time it is not discretionary. It is, I'm doing this, I'm procuring as part of my role, so I have to make this purchase. It's not, oh, I need to be overwhelmed with a sexy shopping experience to be able to get this done. I just need to do my job. And in many cases, those transactions are increasingly being initiated by machines. Historically, it's been EDI and punch out, but now even the major e-procurement platforms, the Jaggers, the Coupas, the Ariba's of the world, they're saying, no, we're moving to an agentic procurement model. And so you better furnish us on the supply side. You better have an MCP server. You better have digitally connected systems. You may have, you better be able to provide digital product catalogs, et cetera, because we're doing agentic procurement and we have to have something to connect to on your side. And just giving us a bunch of APIs to connect to isn't going to cut it. And it's because increasingly the agentic procurement side is doing product research agentically too from within their procurement platform. And so this is, it feels like perhaps the single biggest influential change to the B2B procurement pipeline, certainly in my lifetime. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I'd say a couple of things there around the importance of these shopping LLMs to make recommendations in B2B. I'm not buying a bar of soap. I don't
Yeah.
need a shopping assistant. But in B2B, you're typically buying a large capital purchase that is very complicated. And I need a smart shopping assistant to help me make the right decision. And the second I would say is that these shopping LLMs are surprisingly risk averse. So if you don't have accurate, structured, complete, compliant data, they're not even going to go on to the next step. And the next step is typically going to be looking for things like comparison charts to help make decisions between A and B, ratings and reviews, right? Can I trust? Can I infer intent from what I'm reading in the reviews? This all becomes, data becomes even more important, I think, in the world of B2B procurement.
And when we think about the future of PIM, I am still not 100% sure where AI and PIM will meet in the future. Because I know today, for example, I can upload a 300-page PDF to Gemini and I can immediately start asking questions about it. I can say, where in the document is this discussed? Show me the page and the paragraph, generate a either a single page or a 4-paragraph summary of the entire 300-page PDF. So when we think about vector search and when we think about RAG pipelines, it feels today like AI is heavily used pre-PIM and post-PIM, meaning the whole ETL pipeline is oftentimes mediated by some form of AI in the middle, doing a lot of the ETL activity and getting product data structure in a way that makes sense to a PIM system, and then distributing it out in a way that makes sense to the channels we're distributing it to. But I'm just not convinced that is where this stays, meaning that I think that LLMs of the future, the reality is if we put all of our product data, if we just dump it into a giant S3 bucket, we vectorize the whole damn thing, and we can start immediately asking questions of that data. It doesn't. The thing about LLMs is they don't actually need highly structured data to begin with to be effective. And so I'm just interested in your take on where this ultimately lands, because I'm just not convinced that highly structured data into a PIM, highly structured data in a PIM, highly structured data coming back out of a PIM is where this will forever continue to be the data pipeline model for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I would say so. It does rely on accurate, up to date data to make the right decisions. And at the end of the day, we're seeing a lot more demand for product information management and master data management because our customers recognize the same thing. It's a system of record. So if you're a large enterprise dealing with millions of records, you're not going to trust that to AI or some agentically engineered, vibe coded platform. It's a system of record. When you think about it, OpenAI use Workday to run payroll and financials for a reason. It's a mission critical system of record. Payroll can't be 90% right. So I do think we're going to see, and we're seeing larger contracts, longer terms around our PIM and MDM deployments. I don't see that changing. It doesn't mean that AI is not going to play a role. So we describe our platform as agentic product experience management because we've embedded AI all throughout the platform. Initially, these were co-pilots that automated a discrete task. It could be data classification, match and merge, data enrichment, sentiment analysis, marketing copy generation, you name it. And what we've now done with the launch of Synapse is this is an orchestration layer that is able to execute these co-pilots sequentially or in parallel to automate end-to-end workflows. So AI is going to play a very important role in the next generation of PIM and MDM platforms. And clearly also within the PIM, we're not just storing the product data, the content that's for human customers. We're now also making sure that this data is AI ready because it can support the next era of agentic commerce. And clearly what LLMs are looking for in data is very different to what humans are looking for. Having said all of that, no one has a perfect crystal ball right now. Who knows what press release is coming out next week? But Jason, we feel good about the position where we are. We are at the intersection of data, AI, and modern commerce.
And what is your thinking around MCP emerging as a pretty common both internal and external standard for accessing software and taking agentic actions within software? And I'll just give you an example. So the most of the modern B2C, D2C, and B2B e-commerce platforms for that matter, they've got agentic admin capabilities where you can just describe what you want done and it will do that. Now, normally, internally, the way that they've structured that is they've architected an internal MCP server set is sitting in front of their API layer that then has an agentic chat interface sitting on top of it that is human mediated. So I'm trying to admin my website. I want to do a bunch of things at scale. Instead of doing it manually by pointing and clicking, I just tell the AI what I want done, and it goes and it does it, right? I use Manus every day, and I love action agents. I think they're absolutely phenomenal. I think Perplexity Computer is phenomenal. I think Claude Code is phenomenal. I think that anything that is an action agent versus just an answer agent is phenomenal. And the capabilities that have emerged over the last even 6 months are just, they blow up. Every time I use one of these action agents, and I use them every single day, what they are capable of doing and connecting to seamlessly on my behalf is it continues to surprise and shock me in the best possible way. It's a little bit scary for people new to the industry and who are maybe trying to get in at the ground level, but for those of us that have been in the industry for 26 years, it's great, right? I wonder if you see, and by becoming MCP enabled on their own platform, they effectively are creating a headless management layer whereby those platforms. So let's say I'm an enterprise, I'm an enterprise manufacturer, and I decide to deploy Claude as my standardized AI layer to every single employee in the business. They all have access to Claude on an enterprise plan, right? And so I want to be able to manage something like the Syndigo suite from within Claude, right? And therefore, if I can connect to your MCP server, then I don't actually have to go to into your interface and use your agentic interface at all, because I can access that same agentic interface from within Claude. Are you seeing a growing demand for that third party LLM based management layer sitting over and atop what you provide out of the box internally in your own system?
100%. Of course, the way people interact with our platform is going to be varied and will change. Not everyone's going to log into Syndigo and interact with that platform through a UX. If you do, we also have a conversational bot that you can talk to that can kick off agentic workflows. But we also see a view when no one interacts directly with our platform. Give you an example. Let's say that you are a product manager in a brand and you publish 100 item updates to Walmart. Okay. You then go into your Microsoft environment, Outlook and Teams, where you spend your day. All of a sudden, you get a message in Teams that says, hey, of those 100 items you published, 10 of them weren't successful. They're missing attributes or there are other issues. You can type in there, go find out what the problem is, and get back to me. You go back to work. 30 minutes later, you get another ping. It says, hey, we found the 10 item issues. This is what was wrong. We fixed it, and you successfully published those to Walmart without ever having to log in to the Syndigo platform. That's the future of where this is going to go, Jason.
Yeah, and look, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the day of having 50 bookmarks for your enterprise software admin logins, I think those days are rapidly coming to an end. And I don't see enterprise software going away, but what I do see is I see the unifying layer being your LLM of choice and your action agent of choice. I see that being the unifying layer, with the enterprise software taking more of a backseat, as opposed to, and even down to the ERP layer. I am seeing, like, for example, it used to be even running a pretty good ERP with a pretty strong admin UI, something like a NetSuite, or something reasonably modern, something like a Fulfill. They still required a fairly significant amount of training. If you were going to be a senior admin of a NetSuite implementation inside of a business, you still had to go through a lot of training, a lot of certification, and a lot of hard work to get to a point where you could answer questions across the enterprise when they were asked about how to structure the platform to get the output that we wanted, right?
Mhm.
Even things as simple as complex save searches and reporting and data visualization and all that sort of stuff. That stuff took a long time to learn how to build inside of that platform. And oftentimes, you would need an SI or some sort of a partner to be able to deliver that stuff inside your own enterprise software on an ongoing basis. You might have a $5,000 or $10,000 a month maintenance contract just for them to support you on a running live
Yeah.
platform, right? I see that as largely going away, maybe not 100% going away, but certainly it feels like, especially with the agentic LLMs, they are going to bridge that gap in a way that means you do not necessarily need to be an expert in that software to manage that software in an expert way, because now we can use natural language to administer the software instead of needing to know where the esoteric button that you needed to click to do this thing lived. Even down to something as complex as custom suite script. Now LLMs can write that for you, implement that for you, test it for you, and then return the results to you. That to me is a pretty exciting time, and it democratizes access to enterprise software in a way that almost nothing else has done in the last 25 years.
Yeah, so I would say we spoke about the role of AI in automation of workflows, discrete tasks, but then also end to end workflows. But you're right, it's also going to completely disrupt the insights that can be delivered to an enterprise. I think if you're a software company that's in the business of reporting and visualizations and business intelligence, you should be very worried. What I will say, though, maybe I'm a broken record here, it does still rely on data, on accurate, trusted data to be able to surface those insights.
Yeah, no question about that. And if you look ahead, now obviously you've made some pretty sizable acquisitions recently. And so trying to get those integrated into the business and make that a seamless experience for your customers is priority number one. I get that. But if you were to look out over the next 6, 12, 18 months, are there any, and you don't have to name names because I'm sure it's commercially sensitive, are there any acquisitions on your radar that you say, look, we don't do this today, or we don't do it maybe fully, or we don't do it in the way that our customers are asking us to do it. So we have these gaps. We know they're gaps, but give us 6 months and there won't be gaps anymore. Either we will internally develop something to plug that gap, or we'll acquire someone that already can plug that gap and integrate it into the whole. What if you look out over the next 6, 12, 18 months, what are the biggest priority levers that you think you can help your customers pull with your technology set?
So I'll say three things, and the first two are obvious. One, we're constantly looking to expand our network and our data pool, because that's not something that AI is ever going to agentically engineer.
Fixed. Yeah.
So yeah, network and data, it's a big moat for us, and clearly back to this one to many if you're a brand, or a many to one if you're a retailer value proposition. Secondly, it is looking for proprietary data assets that can train LLMs. We have some inside our business today. One example would be Nutritionix. It's the world's largest database of nutrition information, and it's being used to train AI-based health and wellness apps. For example, and I won't name names, but we have signed some extremely large contracts with some of the hyperscalers to do exactly that. And then the third area is looking for adjacent applications. You and I know that when you look at the commerce application footprint, particularly the e-commerce application footprint in some of these large brands and retailers, even though this industry's been around, 30 years, it's ridiculous how fragmented that environment continues to be. And we repeatedly ask, can you please simplify our environment? We took a big step forward with the acquisition of One World Sync, but there are still other adjacencies where we think we can simplify our customers' environment, but also provide additional value propositions. And a lot of this is around leaning into the future of commerce. So when you think about the Tagstar acquisition, and Tagstar, for those people who don't know, is in a category called conversion optimization, and they are popping real-time contextual messages above the fold that create confidence and urgency to purchase. So depending on the category, 50 to 80% of commerce today is on one of these. No consumer is scrolling down the page to look at this wonderfully curated brand or retailer content. Bounce rate's 50%. You've got 3 seconds to capture their attention. So a Tagstar will pop there. Let's say you're looking for a camping tent for the family. It'll say, easy to set up camping tent. 95% gave this a 5-star review. 13 people looked at this in the last 24 hours. 2 left in stock. That's an example, given the inexorable rise of e-commerce and social commerce, of us leaning into the future and giving our brands and retailers and distributors the tools to win in terms of where the puck is going in e-commerce.
Yeah. And so through that lens of data being a moat, data connectivity being a moat, data supply, ingest, egress, network being a moat, would you see someone like a DDS, would you see them as a competitor, a syndicated data supplier, a partner? Distributor Data Solutions is who I'm referring to. And so they, for an industrial supplier, they gather a whole bunch of product data together for their industry, and then they syndicate it back out again. They'll sell it back to you effectively to be able to help enrich your catalog with information that you need. If you sell anything in an industry that they touch, you're probably going to get data from them unless you're one of the major global players in that space, in which case data as a mode, and you're going to generate your own data that's unique to theirs. How do you see players like that within the context of your network?
Yeah, potential partners. We're never going to own all the data in the universe. We're never going to be the only network. So I'll give you an example, right? We built a pretty big two-sided brand retailer network in the United States. We're not as strong in countries overseas, like we weren't as strong in Germany, for example. So we recognize we're not going to build the network. We're still going to be the single source of truth, PIM and MDM, but we're going to use someone else's network to activate that data through a partnership. So there we partner with Products Up, if you're familiar with Products Up, right? It's one of the largest syndication players in Germany. So we will always partner where it makes sense to get access to data and to get access to a network. But the foundation of our platform is back to that single source of truth, that system of record that is managing your product data.
And you said that people can, let's say I am a retailer and I want to become a customer of yours. I don't necessarily have to take the whole platform on. I may just take on become a syndication endpoint. I may already have an internal PIM system that I'm using across my business. I may have an ETL platform that I'm already using inside my business. I may even have a a product, some sort of, especially for those of us that have those retailers that have house brands, for example, that they manufacture themselves, they may even have a PLM system already existing inside their business. And so they may not need everything you offer, but they might need to be an endpoint of some of their manufacturers that are supplying to them. They may need to consume your data. And so that kind of distributed model of packaged business capabilities is something that you guys plan to stick with.
It is. So I would say, clearly, ideally, we'd like it if a retailer or a brand used our entire platform. That's not reality. So interoperability for us is absolutely key, right? Whether you've got syndication, we can work with somebody else's PIM. Whether you've got ratings and reviews, you can work with our PIM. So if you've got someone else's digital asset management platform, we will interoperate with that. Interoperability is very important for us because that's the reality of most of these enterprise environments today.
Being a good data citizen, just the way that it works, right? Obviously, if you can compete just based on your merits as opposed to data monopolies, then that's always a very good place to be, whilst obviously trying to build competitive moats wherever you can. Makes a heck of a lot of sense. If you could snap your fingers and change one thing about the product data industry writ large, what would that be?
I think it would be to foster more effective partnerships between brands and retailers. Brands are desperate to deliver their brand story that they created to all these retailers where they do business. Retailers at the same time have their own version of how they want those experiences to show up. Target's very different to Walmart, to Amazon. Requirements are changing all the time and just means that the flow of data from A to B isn't always perfect. A key metric that we track is first time publishing success. And it can be challenging if a retailer is constantly changing their requirements and the brand content's getting rejected. Frankly, they're somewhat frenemies. So part of our role is to be an intermediary there, both to foster more effective collaboration, but also to give them the tools that make that more effective. For example, one AI tool we've got in the middle of our syndication network is called attribute value transformation. So when a brand sends their data, and the AI is able to determine, wait a second, the requirements changed. Now you need 5 images in the carousel at this DPI resolution. It will dynamically change that content to make sure that first time publishing success happens. That's the one thing I would say. Syndications has been around a long time. That problem has not been fully solved. And I don't think it's necessarily a technology problem. I think it's a relationship problem.
It's a shared understanding problem, right? And that's uniquely a human challenge. So I totally get that. Technology can help, but it doesn't replace human beings that are making some of these decisions and determinations within these businesses. There's some judgment calls to be made, and that's still mediated by humans, and that's just the reality that we live in, and that's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. Now, if anybody, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, just I'll say where we do see this going, though, and where the next generation of syndication goes, is that it will ultimately not just be human to human. It could be human to bot. It could be bot to human, and eventually bot to bot.
And one final piece on that, I've helped a lot of manufacturers and distributors redefine their entire product data model, because maybe it just evolved organically over time. It wasn't ever built with intent. They never had a unique product data model by product category like they should have, so they tried to stuff everything into a standardized product data model. Data engineering, for lack of a better term, or data design, is something that I've had to help a lot of manufacturers and distributors with, because it's a massive problem, and they oftentimes just don't have that skill set inside the business, or it's never anything that they ever paid particular attention to. And so when you want to explode SKUs, or you want to build SKUs out in a PIM system based on business logic, consistent business logic, you can't do it if you don't have a standard sort of SKU build model or product data model, or whatever you want to call it, with a standardized data dictionary, for example. And do you see a world where there's two massive problems around this? One is that a PIM is really only as good as the scalable business logic that you can build into it, right? And if your model is inherently unscalable because it's one by one, every single SKU gets a unique model, that's a challenge. And it makes it really impossible to scale. And oftentimes, manufacturers and distributors, they would ideally like the SKU build to happen in the PIM first, and even the SKU generation to happen in the PIM, and then that goes into the ERP for pricing per customer and all the other things that need to be units of measure and all that sort of stuff need to be added to it in the ERP, right? And so do you see a world where, and maybe this is already happening in your PIM system today, do you see a world where your system can scan a data set and say, this is how we think the product data model should work for these products or these groups of products or these categories of products, and propose a data model that then gets programmatically engineered into existing products? So we have maybe an old SKU using the old data model, and that's linked via a attribute array to the new SKU based on the new product data model, the refined product data model. And it just seems that there's a lot of time spent by people like me, by SI partners, et cetera, going through a massive discovery process with these manufacturers and distributors, looking at samples of product data across all of the categories that they sell, helping them re-engineer everything about the way that they structure their product data, even down to taxonomy structures, attribute data structures, required attributes versus non-required attributes, attributes that impact price versus attributes that don't impact price, therefore they don't require a unique SKU. There's just so many things to take into consideration in these types of engagements. Do you think there's a world in which platforms like yours can help these brands go from A to Z faster without consultants necessarily needing to be in the loop to help them get to that better place?
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. When you look at in the past, master data management, product information management projects got a bad rap because they'd say, hey, it takes 2 years to deploy. And meanwhile, there's no value realization until the system goes live.
Yep.
That's changed dramatically with the advent of AI. We can now get a platform up and running in 6 weeks, and you can get access to a best practice, industry best practice data model a lot quicker than that, again, using AI. Same is true of integrations, by the way. Often one of the long poles in the tent are all of the
Yes.
integrations, ERP, PLM, that need to
Yes.
provide the data that goes into a PIM. And again, those integrations now, ELT, extract, transform, and load, can all be done using AI. Again, something that can now take days versus months. Second thing I'll say is that so many customers tell you, oh, we're different. And therefore, their data model is only maybe 40%, 50% conforming to what we would view as an industry best practice standard data model for that particular industry. Just had this conversation with one of the largest retailers in Canada yesterday in Toronto. And they've come and said, you tell us what is the 80% that we should be adopting, because we acknowledge that we've overcomplicated this and customized this, and we're not really that different, right? And then we can customize the 20%. So I think part of what we're going to see, I think, is more conformance to industry standards. And then second, as you described, the use of AI, both to build data models, taxonomies, and integrations much faster.
I love that. I love that. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and, of course, the Syndigo website in the show notes. Other than that, if anybody listening to this wants to reach out, learn more about all things product data, aggregation, standardization, normalization, syndication, network effects of that process, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, it's simon.angove@syndigo.com, or just message me on LinkedIn.
I love it. That's so easy. Happy to put that in the show notes. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Mr. Simon Engo from Syndigo, what is your question for me today?
Question for you is, do you support the All Blacks, Jason?
I do 100%, but I am not a massive rugby fan, nor am I a massive soccer fan. So obviously the World Cup being hosted in North America here, it's a massive deal here in Mexico, but I'm not a massive follower of it. I'm more of a motorsport fan, particularly motorcycle motorsport fan. But yes, absolutely, I will always support the All Blacks. No question about it. No matter where they happen to be playing, I will always support them.
Fantastic. Hey, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Some super insightful questions.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.